about the incredible work that they do. We also have some guests from our high school, and I'm not sure. Oh, I think I see Jackie on the line. Good. And I wasn't sure. Is Logan? Logan, are you on the line? You might be the phone number that I'm seeing. I just want to ensure that you're both here. If not, I'm sure he'll be joining us when he can. All right. So onward with the introductions, and you saw a little bit of the slideshow. I don't know if you had a chance to review some of the words that shared some of the great work that Mitch and Brandon do, but may I start with Brandon Knox to introduce himself?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ray. My name is Brandon. I'm the program director at Lambert House LGBTQ Youth Center. I'm in my almost starting my 10th year on staff here at Lambert House, and I'm an alumni of our youth program as well. I found Lambert House as a young adult, and it was an important community space for me. Lambert House provides safe space and opportunities for LGBTQ youth to make friends. And still 93% of youth who come to Lambert House tell us their number 1 goal is to make friends. We have youth participate from across King County, almost every single zip code in King County, plus South Snohomish and North Pierce. And our online programs not only serve youth in King County, but from 28 US states, rural communities throughout Washington, and 8 other countries. So we actually have a really large geographic reach, and we do hold in-person events around King County, not just in Seattle, but in smaller communities scattered around our county to make those opportunities accessible to more youth who can't make it into the city. So thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Brandon. We are so honored to have you here. Okay, Mitch Hunter, I can allow you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mitch Hunter. I'm the training manager from Gen Pride Seattle. We're actually the Two-Spirit LGBTQIA plus Elder Service Center. We are just opening a brand new very first ever in Washington State LGBTQ plus senior affirming center for housing. There's 118 units. Besides this being Pride Week, we just opened applications, and we are helping our seniors make sure that they are able to work with Community Roots Housing in order to get into those 118 spaces. This was heavily supported by not the state as well as the city. And we're looking very much forward to Gen Pride moving into that kind of bottom floor of that. You'll enter by one side. It's right on Broadway. It's in a historic building. So we stand on the shoulders of our predecessors, and we all know that. The work that I do is to train in terms of LGBTQIA senior in some ways, but more than anything, just cultural engagement with this community, and how can we make an inclusive opening for other communities that are maybe not so familiar with who we are. That happens at all the King County senior centers, especially those a part of the VSHSL levy. So putting a plug in for that when you see that coming up on the ballot coming up. Our senior centers in Washington in particular are supported heavily by that levy. So wanted to put that in there. And I'm just open to working with other organizations, any organization that asks for basically a training on our people of the rainbow, on all of us. I'm willing and able, and we do those trainings. So I've been with, I've been with Gen Pride about 3 years now. So
thank you. We are incredibly honored to have you here. In addition to Mitch and Brandon, we also have, I'm happy to say we have representatives from Issaquah High School. I see one of them. I'm hoping the other one will join us here momentarily. But we have Jackie Bean, who is a member of SAGA, and SAGA stands for Sexually Sexuality and Gender Alliance Club at Issaquah High School. So, Jackie, would you mind taking a few moments to introduce yourself?
Right,
I think you might.
Jackie may be having some issues, yes, with the
Oh,
microphone.
audio. Okay.
So I'm working with Jackie on the back end of that. So
No problem. Is Logan here yet?
I see
yes,
Logan.
Yay. Hi, Logan. Welcome. Logan is also at Issaquah High School and is a member of the Saga Club. So, Logan, could you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Logan Burbank. I am last year, when I was a junior, which was like a few days ago, crazy. I was the treasurer of Saga, and next year, starting next year, I will be the president of Saga. So, yeah, I'm very excited.
Thank you for being here. Okay, I'm going to share my screen because I really want to kind of give the folks who are online a preview of what we're going to be touching today. So we finished with our introductions, and I really want to spend the bulk of our time with those topics there in the pink boxes, because we did a considerable amount of planning for this evening, and we thought that these three areas would be really good talking points, conversation points that we could bring forward to those who have joined us here to share some of our thoughts, share some of our highlights, but also in addition to that, get feedback from the audience. So if at any time during this, we're going to make sure that we take a pause. I'm going to have Hannah monitor the chat. And if you want to throw any questions in there, I'll work with the panelists to make sure they're addressed. But the three topics I think you'll find very informative as we talk through them. The number one topic is current events impacting the LGBT community, specifically as it relates to what's going on with Pride Month and the brand names that we're used to seeing and what's changed with them. The second bullet under there, violence against the LGBT community. I don't think that's foreign to anybody who's on the call today. Over the past year, we've seen an increase in violence targeting specifically our community, and we want to be able to share our thoughts related to that. Equally important is what's going on with government and legislation. As we hear from the news on it's what seems to be a regular cadence now, there seems to be a lot of discussion, dialogue regarding government and legislation related specifically to LGBT topics. And I'm going to throw some questions out to our panelists related to those that I hope will, at the very least, inform, if not stimulate, some good conversation. Topic number two, we found this, I started this and I got agreement from our panelists, but it's this whole concept of intergenerational awareness and what the challenges are. So I'm thinking about, I want to think about the friends that you know that might be part of the LGBT community, whether it be, and family members for that matter. When we talk about what's impacting our community these days, how does that land based on the generation that you may be part of? So I want to bring that forward too as a good talking point. Number three, yes, the pandemic impacted not only the LGBT community, impacted many, but there are some points that we wanted to share as it relates to our community that I thought was worthy of surfacing. And then allow for some Q&A. And then we have some, I'd like to ensure that we get some concluding remarks from our panelists at the end. We have a short video to share with you as well. But throughout our conversation, we have some polling questions to throw out at you, just because we found them informative for everybody. I think you'll find them informative when we reveal the results of where the majority lies. A lot of these came from the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, that I found really informative. So I'm going to share some of those stats with you. So know that we're going to throw those poll questions out to the audience throughout the evening. All right. So let me start. And again, please feel free to ask questions throughout, and we'll pause in between these topics to ensure that Hannah brings those forward. So with number one and the first topic there, Pride Month and brand names and businesses and what has changed. For those in the LGBT community, I would say maybe as close to 2 or 3 years ago, large organizations were really quick to jump on the bandwagon. And when I say bandwagon, target the LGBT community as far as marketing as far as means of expanding their footprint to touch on those people who might be purchasing their brands. And I'm going to give you two solid examples. Bud Light and Target. Those were two very large organizations that in the past have been quick to see that June is coming and did a lot of advertising. More recently, though, however, Target pulled items from their shelves for fear of losing some customers. I don't think it was evident here in our Target in Issaquah, but I certainly read it upon reading that article about Target and what had happened to areas outside of the Issaquah area. And one other stat before I throw it out to one of our panelists to help me elaborate on this. I got a quote here when I was looking online and I wanted to share it with you. It said from an executive at one of these organizations, quote, 10 years ago, we used to have war rooms behind when a company would have a new ad that included the LGBTQ people. There were a couple of years, it was a little rough going, but eventually sentiment turned towards mainstream acceptance. But now, over the past year, I think we're at that inflection point again. And that inflection point that's being referred to are people starting to turn away from the population, fearing that it's no longer an area of focus for us, an area of interest for us, an area of controversial for us. So we don't want our brands necessarily associated with them. So I want you to give that some thought, maybe from the advertisements that maybe you've seen on TV or heard on the radio. And I'm going to throw this out to one of our panelists, Brandon Knox. From your perspective and the community that you interact with, should we be concerned about this whole concept of brands being pulled out of targeting or at least considering the LGBTQ community? What are your thoughts?
So overall, I think that the idea that companies find it easier to market to the LGBT community and find ways to visibly support the LGBT community is a mark of positive change in our country and in our culture. And I think the setbacks that we're seeing right now, personally, I think they're likely very temporary and that companies will find their way through these kinds of concerns. For almost 10 years now at Lambert House, I have spent time networking in the community, meeting people at some of these companies, local companies that would be considered micro businesses, all the way up to some of the largest companies in the country that are headquartered here in Seattle. And there are so many LGBTQ people working in these businesses that want to find ways to support the community and who want to find ways to partner and support the work that all of the amazing LGBT organizations are doing. I think that's really the driver here, is that there are these individual employees, mostly who are part of the LGBT community. They're looking for ways to use their role and their status within their company to leverage and support the community. And I think, yes, there are branding opportunities and marketing opportunities, and there, I think, is to a degree instances of what's called pink washing, where maybe companies' marketing or branding is not as authentic in terms of supporting the community. But I've seen Target, both locally and nationally, support LGBT community organizations in ways that do feel authentic, and where, to me, the fact that they sell Pride merchandise isn't just because they're like, oh, we can make a few extra bucks in June, that there are authentic aspects of their support of our community. Here in Seattle, support of Lambert House, but also at some larger national events that Lambert House has been a part of. And, a few weeks ago, actually, we have a program participant who works at a Target location on the east side, and I won't say exactly which one, but it may be close to Issaquah. And he talked about how scary it's been to work at Target with all of these threats of violence, and that the general manager of his store is an out gay man and was feeling like he couldn't be out on the floor of his store because of the threats of violence, right? And so I think that stories like that and the way that it feels for people who work there really bring it home for me and tell me that some of these decisions, maybe to pull back on the Pride merchandise a little, isn't just the company cowering in fear, but that there is a safety element for employees that's a part of the decision making. And I think, I don't work at Target. I don't work for Target. I'm not a part of these decisions, but I think it's really complicated. And, I've had enough experience with some of these companies to know that there is some really heartfelt support, that I have faith that these issues will get worked through over time. And sometimes there's an initial reaction, and then there's a longer time period to work through these complicated questions and situations.
Thank you. And I didn't realize that it was so close. It was right in our backyard, where the fear certainly resonates with folks who run the business. It's alarming.
Yeah. Could I add in just a bit there?
Please.
I'm going to lower my hand. So one of the interesting things you brought up is you mentioned adult beverages. And that has long been a question for the community. There are people that are adamant on either side of the community that believe that support from all these organizations, and this year we have seen a glut of brand new craft beers and craft cider houses that are now branding 4 different organizations and pledging a portion of the sales for the organizations this year. That has happened with Burien Pride, I know, and with White Center Pride. Gen Pride was approached for this year. So I think there's some creativity going on, but we still have this big within our community, we all have opinions, obviously, they're not all the same one, that say that adult beverages and supporting this is also contributing to the fact that many in our community have issues with substance abuse and continue to do that as sometimes just methods of survival tactics during a process of their lives. So we have this both and happening because the money that's brought in and the money that can support a whole Pride Fest, let's just say, by having a beer garden is huge. And many places across the country are able to put on these events just because of that. The other thing I wanted to mention is in our community, we are very loyal to organizations and companies and commercial endeavors that are loyal to us. We put our money where our mouth is. And way back in 2000 and I want to say 7, the queer market was over 700 billion. So I know it's over that now. So it behooves groups to be affiliated, and political climate be what it may, sometimes money speaks over all that.
Yeah.
Excellent points. Thank you, Mitch and Brandy. I'm sorry, another question? Comment?
I think Mitch brought up a really interesting point with adult beverages, and just to comment briefly on how we tackle that at Lambert House. So as a youth center, we have policies and structure our programming in ways where we are helping youth learn and develop social skills and make friends. And for us, all of our programs and activities are alcohol and drug free. And that is about role modeling that you don't need substances to lower your inhibitions, to make friends, to be a part of a community. And also, when we have brands that are approaching us that say, we want to raise money for you, it's hard to say no to that as a small organization. And also, like I said earlier, this is typically by folks who really care about our community and are finding ways to support creatively. And so typically how we do that is we will say to these brands, yes, we would love it if you raise money for us. However, we won't promote this particular fundraiser on our social media channels. You can use our logo and promote in your business, and that's okay because people are coming to you and they're already going to be there drinking those beverages. But we sort of strike a balance with these particular fundraising opportunities, so that we're not sending the wrong message about the role of alcohol in our social activities.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate that. I'm going to move us on to that one, the second one under the first pink box where it says violence against the LGBT community. I mean, we could spend a lot of time on this. Over the past couple of years, it's made headlines. Las Vegas, Orlando, Texas. These things have been happening more and more frequent over the past few years than previously. And I want to throw a stat at you and then have one of our high school representatives chime in here. The LGBT population, specifically 16 and older, are nearly 4 times more likely to experience violent victimization compared to a non-LGBTQ individual. I want you to think about that. 4 times more likely to experience violent victimization. 16 is high school. It's not working as an adult. You're still in high school. So I want to ask Jackie and or Logan, I encourage both of you to chime in here. I would like to just find out, are you experiencing any of that at Issaquah High School, or have you observed it locally where we should maybe surface that here in this conversation? I hope the answer is no, but if you and share with us anything that you may have come across that you felt would be worthy to share with this group, either of you.
Right, before they jump in real quick, do you mind stop sharing your screen so we can just have a better view of the panelist?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. All right, Logan, Jackie.
I would say that yes, violence definitely is a part of that age group, especially with LGBT students. But I think also, at least in this day and age, and especially in Issaquah, it's evolved into a different sort of violence where it's more verbal and like harassment and bullying instead of physical threats of violence, although that does still happen. Personally, it's never happened to me, but I know that at my old middle school, I was in a different district. That was more of an issue, I guess, that kids were getting physically harassed and physically bullied for being openly out. But I think, relatively speaking, Issaquah is a better area about not necessarily reining in that violence, but it's a different sort of violence, which isn't necessarily better or good, but I think it's an improvement from other areas in the state. So
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. Logan, anything to add?
No, not really. I myself, on I believe either 1 or 2 occasions during sophomore year, I was verbally harassed, but this year I have been physically or verbally harassed. So I would say that it is better than a lot of other places at Issaquah High School and middle school, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to add a statistic around elders. So in 2015, there was a longitudinal study conducted by Aging with Pride, Dr. Karen Fredrickson Goldson and team. And elders, primarily over 2/3 or 68% have experienced 3 or more incidents of victimization or discrimination. So those that lead, of course, are transgender and gay men, people of color, living in poverty folks, report a very high lifetime rate of physical assault. So, I want to emphasize how much it is a blessing that we live in this pink bubble here. So there is less. However, we still have the issues there that it is underreported when there are issues. And that follows double or triple for those that have intersecting identities like a transgender or non-binary identity or youth in particular, where names are not correctly attributed and they're not, and things are not really slated as hate crimes that they are. So that is prevalent. And just in March, I attended a vigil at Edmonds United Methodist Church. Their church was targeted with posters that were quite upsetting, violent and threatening towards not just transgender, but also the gay and queer community. Same thing happened in Kirkland. So back on your side, folks, at a Lutheran church. And what they're finding is these groups and are beginning to be quite coordinated. So it was the same posters. They were put in plastic sleeves so that they wouldn't get ruined by rain. And they're the same posters that are showing up at different places. So groups are taking notes from each other. They're coordinating, and it's right in our own backyard. We're not that far. So we do have conservative people in these areas.
And just to add on to that, so the Seattle Police Department shared that in 2021, reported hate crimes were up 28% from 2020, and that it outpaced the rise in hate crimes reported compared to the national average. And so that is a little alarming to me. You know, people think of Seattle and the Seattle area as this liberal bubble, but to your point, Mitch, it's here as much as it is everywhere else. Lambert House has been targeted with anti-LGBT graffiti and damage to our facility. In 2019, when we launched peer support groups for LGBTQ youth in smaller communities around King County, and where we were not sharing the locations of those groups for safety, but we were promoting the fact that we were launching them on social media, we got quite a bit of negative pushback, really vitriolic, hateful things on our social media posts promoting those new programs that were meant to be, lifeline and support for LGBT youth in communities that didn't have anything else. So yeah, to your point, Mitch, it's here.
Having been a resident of Seattle and moved to Issaquah 3 years ago, I've heard and read that the violence is increasing. But I want you, Mitch and Brandon, to think 5 years ago, if we're not seeing that at Issaquah, maybe just one thing that we should consider as part of our city strategies to avoid that from happening. What's the first thing that pops in your head? Obviously, education, but is there something more precise that we can work on as a city to, one, be aware that this is right in our backyard, and to be proactive to avoid that happening here in our own town?
Brandon, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So this may already be happening. I don't know what hate crimes reporting is like in Issaquah, but I think really making sure that there are easy ways for hate crimes to be reported and where that data is aggregated, and I think frankly should be shared in a coordinated way. I think the more data that we have, the better that we can plan our responses. And then I think when something does happen, there should be a plan in place for the city's top leaders to respond, right? To let the community know this is not okay in our community. I think having a quick, decisive response goes a long way to helping people feel supported and safe in their community.
And I would, those are both key items. I would also add, as someone who's been involved with the Seattle Police Department and forming some of the programs for trans people in general, the other part of it is you have to educate the folks that are going to be reporting. You have to make it be safe for them to report. So in other words, if I have an issue and someone has just beaten me up and I call the police to make a report and the police officer asks me what I did, not just what happened, you see, there has to be some sort of education around the reporting and the groups that are gonna take those reports, right? So they need to be educated on how to be able to do that, how to respectfully ask me my name. And when I tell them my name and my pronouns, they could use them. So there's all this thing that's sort of interactive with all this at the same time. The other thing that I would add besides educating obviously the legal the officers kind of organization is also sitting down with people in both communities and bringing them together so that they are educated together on how to do this. So the community feels a little safer. Oh, okay, you really do mean this. You really are asking me. And the biggest thing for the Seattle Police Department is people are not reporting them because of the way that they are treated when they are taking the report. So not only are they up 20, what was it, 1 or 28%, is that's underreported. We know that for a fact. So there has to be sort of a glove in hand thing. Also, how a hate crime is defined legally needs to have a really good look at that, so that there aren't loopholes where things are, oh, well, they said that, there was no Jewish sign or there was no, symbol. So, that doesn't count. Well, no, that's, so both the definitions and then also the education that has to come along with people hand in hand so that that happens.
And there are a couple of things happening at the Seattle Police Department that give me some hope. I've been attending the LGBT Advisory Board meetings for the Seattle Police Department, and they presented on a new program called Before the Badge, where there's, I think, 45 days of training for new recruits before they go to the police academy. And a lot of that is focused on community policing, being a partner with the community, and marginalized populations within our community, including classes and training specifically on how to work with and support LGBT folks and trans folks, presented by members of those communities. So the Before the Badge program is new, but it gives me some hope that things will get better.
Thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, one of our Rainbow Elders, Mac McGregor, is part of that training program, and I served with him on the LGBT commissions. Really great guy.
Hannah, can I ask, can we throw the first poll question out there? I really want to get folks engaged on some of the topics that we have here. And I think poll question 1 and 2, actually, we can throw out there. That's all right.
You should have received a poll question that popped up. Feel free to answer what you think. What percentage of Washington state residents identify as LGBT? Go ahead and click your answer and push submit.
And then I'm going to share my screen. I didn't know if we are in a position to have me grab it, but tell me when the polling is done and I'm going to take over.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and push done here.
What did you get as the top answer?
It was a tie actually between 10% and 15%.
Okay.
Oh,
well, the
15%.
15% was the highest answer.
Yes.
Okay. Are you guys seeing my screen? The answer
Yes.
is 10%. I thought that was a really interesting statistic. you think about that number and how much of the population that encompasses. So it's pretty impressive how many people are impacted by the topics that we're touching on today here in Washington State. So, all right, let me move us forward. I'd like to actually throw out question number 2, if I may. Anna?
All right. All right, which of these 3 are most concerning to you regarding LGBT rights? Healthcare, schools and education, free speech, and expression. Go ahead and select the one that you think is the most concerning to you. Once you've selected, go ahead and push submit. Maybe a few more responses. All right, I'm going to go ahead and push done here. It looks like at 55% schools, just changed. 50% schools and education, and then tying is healthcare and free speech and expression.
Okay, all right. And there's no right or wrong answer to that. It was really me just curious about that. It wasn't in part of the ACLU poll. That's the next question coming up. But I want to touch on this a little bit, those 3 topics, because I want to give you a little bit more backdrop. What's happening at the government and legislation level regarding these 3 areas. So at the start of the 2023 legislation, politicians across the country already introduced 124 total bills restricting LGBTQ people, targeting their freedom of expression, the safety of transgender students, and access for gender dysphoria. And I'm going to break those down a little bit, down to those 3 items that I had on that poll. Healthcare access. Lawmakers are targeting access to medically necessary care for transgender people. Many of these bills ban affirming care for trans youth and can even create criminal penalties for providing this care. 35 bills target healthcare access for transgender people. That's for healthcare access. For schools and education, state lawmakers are trying to prevent trans students from participating in school activities like sports, force teachers to out students, and censor in-school discussions of LGBTQ people and issues. 58 bills target LGBTQ rights in schools and education settings. And then the last one, and I'm going to open it up to some comments, free speech and expression. Despite the safeguards of the First Amendment right to free expression, politicians are fighting to restrict how and when LGBTQ people can be themselves, limiting access to books, about them trying to ban or censor performances like drag shows. 19 bills target freedom of speech and expression for LGBTQ people. And more specifically, as far as what's going on in some of the states, in March 2022, Governor DeSantis in Florida signed the parental rights in education bills, dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill by detractors. We know that made a lot of headlines as far as what teachers can do. In Tennessee, Governor Bill Lee made, quote, a person who engages in adult cabaret performance on public property or where it can be viewed by minors is now considered a criminal offense, and you can be jailed for that. So things like freedom of expression are being attacked, and I think that that's been evident again by the news. I'd like to just maybe throw this out to our panelists and see what their thoughts are around this. Again, remember the topics: healthcare access, schools and education, free speech and expression. I just want each of you to say a few comments. Let's start with you, Mitch, and I'll go to Brandon and our students afterwards.
Okay, I did place some updates of those numbers in the chat, and I'm not trying to upstage you by any means, Ray, but I got some updated numbers on some of that.
Mhm.
So it's really disconcerting, and much of what Ray talked about earlier is that I don't want to talk about politics in particular, but there is no way to talk about the issues with healthcare without talking about legislation. So you know, these things are disconcerting because it is in the states that you specifically named. There are actually suggested bans from travel in a couple of these states. In particular, Florida. I think Montana. So there. Let me see. I'm traversing my notes very quickly, but there are bans from or suggested travel across the country, non-travel states for many of us who identify as trans or non-binary. In particular, in Florida, should I want to travel to Florida, I would not be safe going to a restroom while in Florida. I am required to use the women's restroom in Florida. That is the gender I was assigned at birth. And so I would no more be safe going into a women's restroom as who I am than for fear of being arrested, just like if I did in fact go to a women's restroom. So, you know, it's just it's just not a good environment in all. Like you said, Ray, the common themes among these bills are anti-trans bathroom bills, forced outing, like you mentioned. There's also a resurgence of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that comes into play with most of these bills, like giving you the opportunity to not, for instance, give care based on the fact that you have religious beliefs that would prevent you from that. Essentially putting bias into law, which is a problem, I believe. Anti-drag laws, like you mentioned, don't say gay, anti-trans sports bans on gender-affirming care. And that is not just youth in general, although these are mostly hit youth and mostly targeted at youth and supposedly supporting or helping these youth. But this is leading over into adults who have been on hormones and other kinds of gender affirming care for years and years, and now they are being denied access to hormones that are actually part of your life health.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
So,
You know, if there's one population that really stood out to me when I read the healthcare access, schools and education, and free speech and expression, it was certainly the trans population. And I got this presentation from Jackie Bean, who's on the line with us from Issaquah High School. And I'm going to pull some of these things. If anything, it's an opportunity to educate. So one, Jackie, thank you for this. Thank you for the work that you and Logan do for the Issaquah Club. So when we talk about trans inclusion in the classroom, let's just understand there's definitions that are thrown out there that sometimes people just aren't aware of. So remember, cisgender is someone who identifies as the gender they were assigned at birth. Transgender, someone who identifies differently than with the gender they were assigned at birth. Gender dysphoria and non-binary, also really important ones here for everybody to at least be aware of when we talk about terminology, that we understand what we're referring to, right? I want to just maybe give a minute for Jackie and Logan to talk through any of these. And again, let's local, considering what's going on. And as you put these in, and tell us about what you did at school to educate your fellow students about this. Did you present it? What was the reaction? It looks like you put this together to present to a large audience. What are some of the comments that you had related to this, Jackie and Logan? Can you share it with us?
So this presentation was, we created it because we had an opportunity to present in front of almost the entire staff and all of the teachers at IHS. It was during a staff meeting, one of the mornings. And so we went in with this presentation and we went down the list. We talked about vocabulary, how to better include trans students, how to like safely accommodate if they don't necessarily have a safe environment at home, how to navigate that with like emailing parents and stuff like that. And then also how you can change your language or tweak your language a bit to be more inclusive, not only for the students that are trans, but just everyone else in your classroom as well. And so we went over this presentation with the staff, and for the most part, a large majority of it was overwhelmingly positive. We had a little Google thing to say, leave any comments, questions, concerns, whatever. And the majority of it was teachers saying, wow, this is so cool. Thank you. I didn't know this. So it was really fun, really great, really nice to go in there and actually teach a lot of teachers that sort of stuff. But also I think it's important, instead of purely just teaching them, to just get that sort of information out there, especially coming from us. I think is important because a lot of the time adults will hear information, they have this information, and it is true information, still qualifies. But I think in terms of education and being more inclusive in a classroom with other students and also other teachers, I think it's good to hear that stuff coming from a student.
Yeah, and can I ask you, by educating the staff, what was their takeaway from that? It was to be incorporated into some further education for your for other students at the school. What were they going to do with it?
Our main point to make to the staff was to listen to the trans students at IHS and to sort of help them however, in what sense they needed help. For example, I sort of socially transitioned my senior year, and a big thing for me was I went into the women's locker room to change for gym class, and I talked to the teachers I had for my 2 semesters there, and both of them were accommodating. They were okay with it. I went up to them, I explained, I don't necessarily feel comfortable changing in the men's locker room. Would it be okay if I changed in the women's locker room? And we figured that out. It wasn't too much work, but I think at the end of the day, it's mostly just to get teachers to listen to their students to see how they can be helpful, because there isn't necessarily just one way to be helpful. It's going to depend on the student and depend on their situation. So.
Well, first of all, thank you for putting this together. Thank you for educating the staff. And I hope what they do with it is to continue to educate your colleagues there at the school so they really understand this. I think it's important for them to message this out appropriately based on the audience that they're targeting. Logan, did you have anything else to add?
No, not really. Jackie, she really gave a great summary of what we were trying to do and how the presentation was supposed to inform the staff members at our school.
Okay. All right. Again, thank you both. Okay, before I leave the topic of government legislation, was there anything else, Brandon, that stuck out to you as far as healthcare access, schools and education, free speech and expression? Those are the 3 that we threw out in the poll. In the work that you do, that would be good to share with the group here.
Yeah, I just think in all of these areas, there are tremendous opportunities for adults to be allies to LGBTQ youth and stand up for what youth need, and really supporting their success and helping to advocate for them. It's appalling to me to think that books, are being pulled from school library shelves because there is maybe a same-sex family in the story, or same-sex parents in the story, or things that seem pretty benign, and they're being labeled with all of these horrible words that are just not accurate. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for people who care about this community to step up and to lean in and to support and use their voice and use their time. Yeah, so I think that's my takeaway here.
Great point. Great point. Thank you.
The one thing that I wanted to add is that I've learned through a lot of work is that these are deeply held beliefs that people have. And the one thing that I've learned is it doesn't help to argue. But what I do And I think the way the community, both youth, adults, all of us are coming together is to tell our own stories, because that's something that no one kind of can come up against. And when we tell our own stories, then I become human to you. I become your neighbor. I become, oh, that guy that's always walking around. Yeah, I love him. He's got a good smile, and then they find out more about me. And so I just learned that some of the political tactics that maybe we've used in the past, not so much come against and argue, but more educate and do these things. And so that's one of the big things that I've been pushing towards. And I think we have stories now. We have I'll put it in the chat, but there's a site called Outwards that is particularly LGBTQIA seniors telling their stories, historical things that we all need to know. And so again, part of that intergenerational work that we can do together, I think, just like Brennan brought up. So appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Brandon. Hannah, are there any questions that are being thrown at us that we should take pause and address, or can I move on?
No questions right now.
Okay.
So we're good to move forward.
All right. I'm going to throw this intergenerational awareness for our audience. I'm going to throw something in the chat when I talk about intergenerational awareness. And I want you to look at this timeline that I'm going to throw in there. And take a moment when we say a generation that I'm referring to, all the way back to the silent generation in the 20s and 30s and 40s, baby boomers in the 1946, 1964, Gen X, 65 to 80, millennials, 81 to 96. I want us to take a moment to look at how the topics that we're talking about today transcend and impact these different generations. And when I say, as I headline this as intergenerational awareness, you have on our panel here four people who represent four of these. So Mitch is a baby boomer. Ray here, your host, is a Gen Xer. We have Brandon as a millennial, and we have Jackie and Logan as Gen Zs. So when we talk about LGBTQ topics, it's very dependent on what was happening and when, right? And what was the impact to us at that moment in time, based on who our friends are, who our family. Mitch, I'm going to start with you, and just from being a baby boomer and what's happened, maybe just what were some of the memorable things? And I want you to compare what's happening now to your generation. When 10 years ago, is there something that sticks out to you that we feel that this group needs to be aware of, I guess, from your perspective as a baby boomer? I'm going to do the same thing with Gen Xers.
First of all, I think it's just my ego, but I'm very much on the very tail end of the baby boomers. However, yeah, this actually kind of plays just the same thing that I was just talking about. What we're realizing right now is the way that legislation is happening, and people are using legislation kind of to exclude rather than include people, is very reticent, and they're using the same tactics as were used back in the 50s. We're talking about, Anita Bryant days. We're talking about pre-Stonewall. We're talking about Stonewall. Things that legislation, gerrymandering, looking at how we can fix the voters and where they fall and where our conservative ones fall. They're talking about, frankly, fear-mongering. When we looked at the early, the AIDS pandemic, the HIV, fear-mongering, it's a gay disease. It's And how will we have erasure? Let's get rid of those folks. Let's put them somewhere. You know, we're hearing this. It's just really this echo from the past. And I think the best thing that we in terms of the community can do is to step up, because we learned how to use legislation. Baby boomers are the ones that created most of this legislation that got us, that were in there fighting for rights and bringing suit against folks and trying to get marriage privileges that were the same as of their marriage privileges for spousal rights, etc. So I think it's really interesting, and it's almost a boomerang effect, but we've been through it. And so depending on and checking in with those of us that are from that generation is going to help move things forward. But very much a nod to the current generation that is actually pushing all these issues forward.
Agree. I don't know if it's the current challenges, but certainly at the forefront of a lot of the discussions that are going on. So great point. I think I'm next with the Gen Xers being born in the 60s. A lot happened in that era. We think about the very pivotal Stonewall riots that happened in New York City that put the gay population front and center as far as really standing up for the rights that we believe we have. But I want to share something with this generation. So we're talking about people in their late 40s, early 50s, like myself. And we get to this comfort zone where we have a little bit of relaxed with the current topics that are going on right now. We get so immersed in the day-to-day activities. And let me share a little bit of myself. So my husband and I have been together for, it's going on 20 years. We were blessed to have a child that we adopted. We brought her home when she was 8 days old, so she's the love of our lives. We get into that routine where we're raising this daughter, and we have wonderful friends, and we're so focused on picking her up from school, getting her to point A to point B, and then when she approaches high school, there's all these other things that are going on that take away from our time. And oftentimes, we skim over those areas that really impact where we originated from. And I'm talking about the LGBT community. So I think for us in the Gen X arena or section of that timeline is just to be aware that don't get too comfortable. Be aware of what's going on, because you, Ray Manahan, are impacted by what the events that are going on. And without what had occurred in the baby boomer area, or even in your area, that got you to where you are today, that made the LGBTQ population be present and acknowledged in the world that we live in today, can't be forgotten. Because you know what? You might not have been able to adopt that child that runs your world. So I take that as practice for myself and my husband to really think about what's going on today, and to be just really aware that we need to be sensitive about the challenges that confront us today. So I wanted to share that with this audience. Brandon, may I ask you as a millennial to chime in on when I say intergenerational awareness? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, millennials are really a transitional generation in so many ways around technology and communication and the way that we connect with one another. When I was in middle school and high school and was coming into my own awareness about my sexual orientation, I grew up in a small town in Southern Washington where there were no GSAs in the schools, there were no visible role models. There were two older gay guys that were harassed and bullied so badly that one's family moved away and the other ran away. I snuck in one episode of Queer as Folk when nobody was home, and then I was so nervous that somehow my parents would know that I never watched it again. And Ellen DeGeneres came out when I was young, and there were starting to be some visible national and international figures, but it was really quite limited. To now, where there's so much availability of information and so many ways to connect with peers and connect with others and learn about yourself and learn about others. I think that millennials we're still sort of coming up in a time when there was if you didn't grow up in a big city, all you had was isolation. And so I think, for millennials in Seattle, there were starting to be GSAs in high schools, and there was maybe a little bit more local visibility. And so there's even this contrast for that generation, I think, between smaller communities and larger cities. I came to Seattle when I was 18 and was all of a sudden had so much more availability to me in the LGBT community in ways that I couldn't have even imagined growing up in my hometown. So there are just so many transitions in my generation and difference based on where you lived, right? And I look at the younger generations coming up, like I've been working with and supporting Gen Z when I worked in higher ed and here at Lambert House, and now we're starting to have Generation Alpha coming into our programs. Really, there's just some really stark differences, but I'll let Jackie and Logan comment on that.
Thank you, Brandon. Jackie, Logan, as Gen Zs, we're always learning new things, right? Gen Zs, what are your thoughts around this when I say intergenerational awareness? I'm sure you have a lot to share about how the messaging and what's going on today really needs to be shared with the larger LGBTQ community, and we shouldn't be laxed. What are your thoughts around this?
I think it's interesting because we're like sort of the generation that's grown up alongside all of this technology, and it's advancing, and all this information, all this, it's essentially just at our fingertips, which on one hand is really cool because it allows you to find community a lot easier, but at the same time, you're also super aware of all the other negative stuff going on in the world and all the other stuff that's happening against our community. So I think it's sort of a double-edged sword with all this technology and ability to communicate with others, because on one hand, it is so easy to find other people from our community and find friends and relationships and all that sort of stuff. We're also very aware of the other side of that, of all the hate and the bigotry and stuff. And I think even the younger sort of generations, Alpha, when I came out to my siblings, who are much younger than me, it was pretty easy because I just said, hey, it's me, your older sibling. I feel different now. I'm your sister now, not your brother. And for them, it was just, they got it because A, they hadn't been exposed to any of those other biased or bigotry or whatever, but also when they're young, it's sort of impression you make, if it's a positive one, if it's a good one, you're just teaching, hey, there's people like this out in the world. They just pick it up. And I think that sort of ties into like education. If you just teach them young, then some of the hate, I think a good chunk of the hate just sort of stops because it no longer is able to grow. So yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Wow. To be able to have that dialogue with your sibling is great. Can I ask you, and you don't have to answer this, was it challenging for your parents? I don't know where they land in this spectrum. How was that journey for you? Was it easy, hard, challenging?
It was an experience. It wasn't necessarily bad, terrible, but there was some challenges and difficulty at first, because I think when, at least from like a child's perspective, these people know you your entire life, they raise you, you sort of grow up, and then all of a sudden, bam, here's this thing about me, especially if it's not something that you're aware of earlier on. I didn't know personally that I was trans until middle school. And so I'd gone all of elementary school and had just started middle school, which was already a transitional point in my life. And then it occurred to me, and I didn't really know how to feel about that because I was a young teenager, all that stuff getting figured out. But I think that, again, just getting it out there, like with my siblings and with my parents, I think that just saying it earlier on, I guess, or just putting information out there, that sort of education, it helps relieve some of the stress, which I guess isn't the scenario for everybody. I think it's different some people have different family situations, but I know for myself, I was pretty lucky, but I think just talking about it gets one step in the right direction.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Hannah, any questions from the audience coming in that we should address? Otherwise, I'm going to ask if we throw up poll question number 3.
Yeah, there's no questions right now. A few comments from Mitch, if you want to share while I pull up the poll.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention is I put in the chat the silent generation. Those are folks in their 80s and 90s, and the ones that were transsexuals at the time. We did not have the term transgender at the time. Those folks were told, don't tell anybody, divorce and leave your family, divorce anyone that you know, your loved ones, your friends, move to another state, change your name, and just pray that you never have to go to the ER or the hospital. So, you know, we've come such a long way. And the one really big nod I wanted to give is that besides youth, the fastest growing population of those who are transitioning right now is over the age of 65. So if you think that I'm just kind of throwing this stuff out there because I want to be included, I mean, yes, but we're going to be seeing these folks. These folks are coming to our activities. These folks are coming and being a part of our involvement, and folks are new and in transitioning even now. So very much give the nod for all these folks who are teaching us and opening up the idea of gender as a construct, learning about gender identity, gender expression, pushing a new form of language and pronouns. And so thank you. You know, there was no GSAs when I was in high school. You know, they knew about a few of us and we were supposed to not tell anyone. So yeah.
Yeah. And then before I launch the poll here, Catherine, thank you so much for this. She said PBS has a documentary called Casa Susana about, or maybe I said that Susanna, about people in 1950s cross-dressing in New York City. Very eye-opening. So great suggestion for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I'm going to go ahead and launch our poll here. This one's a fun one. Alrighty. So should pull up on your screen. What age group has the highest percentage of individuals who identify as LBGT? Is it 18 to 24-year-olds, 25 to 39-year-olds, 40 to 50-year-olds, 55 to 64-year-olds, or 65 and plus? What do you think? Go ahead and select and push submit. Okay. Few more response. Alrighty, looks like more responses. Okay, so it looks like a majority of folks here believe that 18 to 24-year-olds, 45% say that they are the highest percentage of individuals who identify as LBGT. The next one is 25 to 39-year-olds at 27%. 18% is 40 to 50 years old. 9% is 55 to 64 years old, and 0% of us think that it's 65 and plus. Ray, you want to go ahead and give us the answers?
I'm sharing it on my screen. Can you still see my screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me change my view.
So tell me if you don't see it. Oh, there you go. So what is the age group that has the highest percentage of individuals who identify? And this comes right from the ACLU, from their census. It's 25 to 39 years old who identify as such. 41%. It's pretty big pretty big change from the one above and below it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that poll. We have about less than 15 minutes here, and I want to return to the last topic on our agenda. So, and then we have one more poll question left for some Q&A and some closing remarks from our panelists. But the pandemic, let's think about that and how it impacts our families, our work, our day-to-day lives, our communities. I want to just focus on the LGBTQ population. And when we were discussing this, Mitch and Brandon and Jackie and Logan and I, there were some pluses and minuses. So just highlights of it, good outcomes. And I think this might transcend just our LGBT community. When you think about good outcomes of the pandemic, very few, but let's really give that some thought, at least for the populations that we're considering here. Online communication. People who are in the closet have a comfort level of not being face to face and communicating through the web or privately might be easier for them and allows for that privacy and anonymity. But then again, same thing that might apply to others. And I'm going to ask my panelists to chime in here. Bad outcome could be some folks just require that face-to-face, in-person interaction. So that's what the pandemic did to us. So Brandon, can I throw this at you and maybe have the others chime in too? What are your thoughts about this and maybe the people that you interact with in the great work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, even before it became necessary to close our drop-in center and we began talking about what are we going to do? Like if public health says you shouldn't be gathering in large groups anymore, how are we going to keep serving this community and really stay central on our mission? And what we did is we launched online groups to bring youth together socially when it was no longer safe to have youth physically in our drop-in center because of the way that COVID-19 spreads. And we did that with the intention of continuing to connect with and serve youth in our local community here, because we knew that some of them might be stuck at home, not going to school, not having other community spaces, with families who are not supportive of their identities, or where youth maybe aren't out because they don't know what their parents' reactions would be or are afraid of what their parents' reactions might be. And where at least being able to get youth together online was a way to keep them connected to one another and might help buoy them through the pandemic, not knowing how long this was going to go on. And a silver lining to that and to our launching online groups was that youth from all over the country and in some other countries around the world found us. It was not something we even thought would happen. It was not necessarily our intention. But once we started realizing that was happening, it didn't matter where youth lived. If it worked for them to come to our groups and our programs, we had no reason to turn them away. And so we've had youth from 28 US states and 8 other countries, including some of these states that are introducing and passing anti-LGBTQ bills: Florida, Texas, Georgia, many others, and some very homophobic countries: Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Barbados, places where it is common to be killed for being a member of the LGBT community, even more so than it happens here in the United States, where the state kills LGBT people, or at very minimum completely ruins and destroys their lives. So, that has sort of been a silver lining, and we committed early in the pandemic to maintaining our online programs, even as we began to do in-person programming again, first outdoors in 2021, and this year we're rebuilding indoor in-person programming, because many of these youth just don't have anything in their communities, didn't have anything before the pandemic, they don't have anything now, and so we don't want to remove access to that community and that support.
Wow. I think we also saw those numbers are just amazing, Brandon. That is so great. I think we also saw the benefit of being able to reach so many more people. We have seniors who don't choose to come and drive to other locations, especially those that are in our rural areas. We were able to reach out to them mostly through a lot of our senior centers. Downside was that we had folks that had to learn how to use technology, and we had to get technology to them. And we did both. We pivoted very early on. All of our recreational and physical exercise classes went directly online. We did a cooking class where we got groceries to people, and then they tuned in online and worked with our folks at Lifelong to be able to cook a meal together, and they did that on camera. So there were a lot of things that were really great, and yet we're looking forward. We still have folks who it's not really an accessibility thing for them to be able to use technology, and yet we are reaching far and wide again. So I don't think actually anyone in business, I've already read all this stuff on business and on training. It's not going away. It's here now, and it's very efficient. It's very economical. So it'll always be hybrid, I think.
Wow. Wow. Kudos to both you and your organizations and the work that you do to be able to sustain this community throughout a challenging time and sharing some of the great work that you do. Can I ask Jackie and Logan? I have a daughter in high school, and she struggled through the pandemic, but with the work that you do, good, bad, anything that you can share with our audience here, the outcome is any impact to the Saga and the Saga team and the work that you do at Issaquah High School?
So in the Issaquah area, there is a cafe called The Garage, and it is basically where a lot of the high school students go. And during the pandemic, they weren't allowed to be open. So they would hold Zoom sessions and stuff like that to allow high schoolers to go in there and just have some sort of social interaction. So that was really helpful for people who were struggling with like their families and like their own sexual identity and stuff like that, to have a place to go to talk about that. So that was really helpful and impactful during the pandemic for the LGBTQ plus community.
I love it. Logan and Jackie, I don't know if you know this, but the Equity Board meets right next door in that conference. And I had the chance to meet with Kaylee H., who's the executive director of The Garage, and the work that they do. So thank you for calling them out and the great work that you are involved in over at The Garage and how they've been able to sustain the community throughout the pandemic. It's really nice to hear. Okay, I think, as I'm going to try to get us to wrap up here in 90 minutes, can we throw, Mitch, is it appropriate to throw poll question 4 out, or should we do Q&A? How about we do it now? Is that all right? Yeah, okay. Hannah, I'll turn it back to you.
Perfect. So the poll question here, it's a 2-part question. It's really just kind of wrapping up the event. So do we want to maybe actually we'll end with that if that's okay, if we want to jump into some Q&A first, and then we have a short clip to show as well, and then I can do the poll if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to make sure that we get the most number of people to be able to answer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
Mitch. Yeah. I'll throw it out there and feel free to answer it as you see fit. And then in the meantime, if anybody has a question, this would be a great time to throw it out either in the chat, or feel free to unmute your mic and come on camera or not, whatever you feel comfortable with. As you can see, our panelists are very just open, wonderful people. Would love to answer any questions that you have. So I'll throw the poll out while if anybody wants to think of a question and type it out. And again, this poll is a 2-part question.
You can just leave it open till the end, and that way people got plenty of time to answer. So
Exactly.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, as she's throwing that out, I want to, as we wrap up here in the next 4 minutes, I want to give our amazing panelists, first of all, first and foremost, thank you for being here. This has been and we're incredibly honored here in the city of Issaquah to have you join us and to share some of the great work that you do, share some of your insights, touch on these very sensitive topics that I brought forward today. So just some comments here. Brandon, can I start with you? Any closing comments that you want to share with the group?
Yeah, I think my closing thoughts are that there are really great organizations in our community, 3 of them here, but many others that are doing important work. Lots of ways to get involved and to continue to make positive change for our community. And I think that's part of what Pride is all about, right? It's about recognizing what's happened, where we've come from, the change that's been made, and also recommitting to the work that still needs to be done. So thank you for this opportunity, and I hope everybody's able to find ways to help create that change.
Thank you, Brandon. Mitch, what about you?
I just wanted to say it's only going to happen when we all come together to work together. So it doesn't matter what our age group is. It doesn't matter if we consider ourselves identified with the people of the rainbow or the progressive people of the rainbow or the inclusive group, whether we're allies or accomplices, is that we all have to take up the mantle of each other's issues and stand with and for the people that are, that means we got to get involved in anti-Asian hate, and we need to get involved with Black Lives Matter, and we need to get involved with drag queen issues. We need to, it's all of our issues. We're all human. So that's what I'd just like to say. And I appreciate that the all ages play kind of part of the skating rink thing going. So yeah, all ages skate.
Love it. Don't be sedentary. Be aware of the issues regardless of which demographic you fall in. That's fantastic. Jackie, any comments, closing comments from you?
I just want to say thank you. This is a really cool opportunity. I think it's really neat as a young person to be invited for this sort of thing. And I think it feels like more inclusive, like, wow, the youth has more of an impact, more of a voice than I thought. And I just think it's really neat and really cool to be a part of something like this. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, our honored to have you here, and thank you for the great work that you do at Issaquah High School. Same thing to you, Logan. Thank you for the great work. Any comments from your end?
Same thing as Jackie. I really appreciate you allowing us to give our input as Gen Z people, part of the LGBTQ plus community. And I hope that in the future I can be a part of more panels like this and just talk more. So thank you.
Okay, you've committed yourself as I start to think about next year. So thank you. Okay, so last item. I know we've had some errors. Oh, okay, I see it now. I was seeing, what is your? Okay. I'm going to make sure.
I had a poll with 2 questions on it. It may not have gone through, so I separated them to maybe make it easier.
Okay.
Just answer them as they pop up. I would appreciate that.
Okay, I saw one pop up for me, and that was the only one. Was there a second one that had to come up, or did I have a hover everything in the chat? And then we have one video to present. So when I did my poll, Hannah, I only had one come up. Was there a 2-parter?
Yes. So the first poll that popped up was 2 questions. So you have to push the arrow to get to the other one, but some folks said working. So what I did was I just did the poll separately. So I had 2 questions. So you may have gotten a few pop-ups. So thanks for your flexibility with that.
Oh, I see it now. Okay, I just had to re-click it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to add that I'd like to offer my name and organization, email and website. And Brandon, you do the same. And
absolutely.
Logan and Jackie, if you're interested or willing, that'd be cool too. So whatever you're comfortable with.
Hey, if anything, we can share resources, share knowledge, share connections to this venue. Jackie and Logan, we were talking, I think, before we started about the need for additional volunteers at the organizations at Gen Pride and Lambert House. So if there's interest with you, not only the two of you, but others within Saga or Issaquah High School as a whole, know that you can turn to Brandon and Mitch for those opportunities. All right, to wrap things up here, I have one short video, but I put concluding remarks because the only thing I wanted to say is thank you to all our panelists, Brandon, Mitch, Jackie, Logan, Councilmember Hunt, thank you for being here, all our attendees. What a great way for us at the City of Issaquah to celebrate Pride Month. We hope this continues to grow next year. We'd like to make it maybe an in-person visit where we have a room full of people, but we kind of wanted to keep it simple here this year going into our second year. I wanted to share this video because I want you to be aware of the impact that's going on with organizations that like mine that are part of, because I found this when organizations like mine, which is very large, United Healthcare is one of the largest organizations in the country, and leaders are becoming more and more aware of the topics that are impacting us as a community. So Hannah, if I can have you share that, that would be wonderful.
What would I say to the young LGBTQ person who is in the closet and struggling with coming out? The messaging shouldn't be to that young person. The messaging should be to the society and the community that surrounds that young person. Too often, we turn to the oppressed to solve their problem. No, the larger community, I am a lesbian myself. I am out of the closet. It is those who have a voice or a platform, a social responsibility. Those are the people to whom we should speak. The people, just by way of history, I'm Nigerian by birth. I still have family in Nigeria. I understand the constraints. If I were to return to the country of my birth, I would be subject to 14 years in jail. So I am unable to return to Nigeria. The struggles are real. So I think it is important for us, when we have a platform, to create an environment that's psychologically safe. Because you cannot ask anyone to come out of the closet into a space that's unsafe. And so when you look at the work that we're doing across the enterprise, inclusion, diversity, equity, the whole goal of that is to create a community, a safe space where people can truly be themselves.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Hannah. And I know we're past our time. Again, thank you for all of you who are online, who've hung out to the end. We look forward to have more opportunities to collaborate with you in the future. Did I see a hand raised, Councilmember Hunt? Did you have a comment? Okay. We will know that your messaging and our conversation will be shared broadly throughout the entire community because it's been recorded. I'm going to take some opportunity at the next Equity Board meeting to share the great topics that we touched on today. And lastly, happy Pride Month to you. Enjoy this weekend. It's going to be an amazing weekend with great weather. I hope it's an opportunity for you to celebrate. I'm looking forward to it myself. Hannah, thank you for all the coordination that we've done. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you all so much. This was great.
Look
Bye.
forward to seeing you all at all the events. So.
For sure. Thank you.
Mhm.